Even if you don't have a gluten intolerance, sensitivity, or wheat allergy, removing gluten from your diet may actually be one of the most helpful things you can do for yourself. So I'm going to explain exactly why that is. But first I'm going to talk about what gluten is, what kind of foods you can find it in, and some reasons you may want to exclude it from your diet altogether. I'm Carly. For anybody who is new here, I am a plant-based nutritionist. I've also been vegan and plant-based myself for approximately 5 years now. There was some, transitional period, so I don't know exactly how many years to include, but I've also been gluten-free for the past 10 years, about 10 and a half years now. So just to give you a little background where I'm coming from and the experiences I've had researching this topic. So gluten is just a protein found in wheat, rye, and barley. It triggers an autoimmune response in people with celiac disease, or it triggers other symptoms of leaky gut in individuals who just have a poor microbiota, and in turn will cause those sorts of food sensitivities to things like gluten. And then there's a wheat allergy, which is specific to wheat itself, instead of the barley, rye, or other constituents. So some foods containing gluten are obviously bread, pastas, breakfast cereals. You can find it pretty much anywhere these days in the westernized food supply, which is terrifying for anybody who's just been diagnosed with celiac disease or some kind of gluten sensitivity. But it takes time, but I promise you, you will develop new strategies to ensure that you are abstaining from having gluten in your diet. So if you have a gluten intolerance, that would include about 1% of the population, which is about 1 in every 100 people. So I highly suggest you get that blood work done if you suspect any of those symptoms, things such as digestive issues or problems with bowel function. It can also be joint pain or inflammation, headaches, fatigue, skin issues, acne, depression, anxiety, ADHD. It's a pretty big list, so you might just want to go check if you have any inclination that this may be causing you some distress. Gluten sensitivity is a little more complicated because it's harder. There's no standardized test. You basically just remove it from your diet and see what happens. So if you feel better and then you reintroduce it into your diet and then you start having more issues, obviously that's the trigger and you refrain from gluten. It's really up to you on how stringent you want to be on this strategy. But just be aware that gluten sensitivity has impacted more and more and more of the population over the past few decades. It's to the point where some research is showing about a 10% mark of all individuals out of the general population. That's about 1 in 10 people are suffering from gluten sensitivity right now. So just to give you a little perspective on the commonality of that issue. So the last reason I want to talk about why you might want to remove gluten from your diet is weight loss. It is so easy to lose weight when you can't eat all the junk food that is attached to gluten-containing products like cookies and pastries and pancakes and brownies and breakfast cereals and things of that nature. So they have found that wheat is actually technically indigestible. There are certain polypeptides that are not able to be broken down through our digestive system. So those components are actually going to cause the inflammation that can increase weight gain or rates of obesity. So the jury's still out on whether or not gluten-containing foods specifically reduce weight loss, but in my experience, it's been so much easier to maintain my weight without having to include those gluten-containing foods in my diet. And basically, when you remove those foods, you're promoting a healthier diet. So if you focus on including naturally gluten-free foods in your diet as opposed to just swapping what you used to eat with a gluten-free version after you decide to go gluten-free, you're really not doing yourself any favors, because those foods actually tend to be just as harmful, if not more harmful, because of all the extra fillers they have to include in those foods. Just go to the grocery store sometime and hold up, a box of gluten-free pancakes next to a box of regular pancakes and see the difference. They will hold likely a similar amount of sugar and preservatives and junk. If you stick to foods like legumes, whole grains, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, you will have no problem maintaining a lean body mass. A few downsides I want to go over real quick before you decide whether or not to choose this gluten-free diet is, number one, it can be restrictive. It can be extremely restrictive if you live in Western cultures, such as America, because it is ubiquitous throughout the food supply. So if you're willing to deal with that, it's absolutely worthwhile. The second reason is social alienation. You will go through a very long transition period of dealing with people's questions and learning how to bring along your own gluten-free foods and maintain distance from roommates or family members in your kitchen that do not follow a gluten-free dietary pattern. So it can be very stressful at first. It took me at least 5 years to adjust. And the third reason is a gluten-free diet can be more expensive. However, this is only when you substitute old versions of foods with new gluten-free versions. So like removing a regular pasta and incorporating a gluten-free pasta, for instance. That pasta is going to be more expensive only because that manufacturer had to ensure that there was no gluten-containing particles on any of the equipment that was used or during any of the processing. So just a few things to think about. Ultimately, if you remove gluten from your diet and it makes you feel better or it takes away some kind of ailment you've been suffering from, then please continue removing gluten from your diet. Gluten-containing foods are actually non-essential. As nutritious as some of them may be, such as whole wheat, you can easily get those nutritious components that you're not getting from the wheat from other foods. So, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you next time.